How do we fix damage? That's one of the biggest questions people have been having this league, and today I'm going to help answer it. I'm currently running Juice T15s and T16 maps with Delirium as well as Breach. We've even done some pinnacle boss fights, all on my Warp Stormweaver budget endgame setup. And this sort of content is no joke. It requires either a ton of damage, a ton of defense, or ideally both. And since I'm on Stormweaver, we're going to tackle the problem of fixing damage specifically through that lens. What's up, YouTube? It's your boy AP, and today we're breaking down exactly how to scale damage efficiently while still keeping a tanky, balanced character. So first off, you guys have to answer this question for yourself. Do I want to be Glass Cannon or not? If you're fine with getting one shot every time you make a mistake, then fixing damage is simple. Just grab all the DPS nodes and stack offensive gear. But that's not my philosophy. As you can see from the B-roll, I'm fighting Trialmaster here. I purposely leave in the clip where I face tank his highest damage move, about 7,000 damage. I mess up, but I still win the fight on a relative budget. And that's the style I prefer, scaling our characters so we can make mistakes in boss fights and still succeed in the end. Every Path of Exile 2 build I've released so far has followed the same principle. So if you're watching this video, you know we're aiming for a strong, well-balanced tanky setup, which means when we scale damage, we have to be strategic and efficient about it. Before we jump in, I want to give a quick thank you to today's video sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is an easy-to-use VPN for encrypting your internet connection. This is important for keeping your browsing data private and secure, even on public Wi-Fi. I use Surfshark myself when I'm working from cafes or traveling, so it keeps my data safe from hackers, trackers, and even my internet service provider. But Surfshark isn't just about security. It's a total game changer for streaming as well. Platforms like Netflix and Disney Plus restrict content based on where you live, but with Surfshark, you can unlock libraries from all across the world. For example, I can watch The Office US when it's in Canada's Netflix library and switch over to Japan's library to watch Spirited Away. Surfshark makes it simple to access shows and movies that would normally be blocked in certain regions. And here's what I love the most. One Surfshark account covers unlimited devices. My phone, laptop, tablet, even the whole household. All are protected under a single subscription. So if you want more privacy, more security, and way more content, check out Surfshark using the link below. And with their 30-day money-back guarantee, you can try it completely risk-free. Go to surfshark.com/animeprincess or use code animeprincess at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. That's Surfshark VPN, protecting your connection and opening up your world. Alright, so let's break it down. We'll cover budget options first, and then talk about expensive stretch goals you can aim for once you have currency. We're going to start off with the simplest concept that could possibly cause a drastic drop in damage, which is coincidentally also the cheapest and easiest problem to solve here. And that would be having an appropriate amount of penetration. So the way penetration works in Path of Exile is it lowers enemy resistances up to 0, but you can never get negative resistances while using penetration. And the way the damage is calculated with penetration is that monsters can have up to 75 resistance. And if they have 75 resistance, we do a quarter of our damage to them. If it goes down to 50%, we do half damage. If it goes down to 0, we do our full damage. And there are ways for monsters to have a ton of elemental resistances all the way up to 75. For example, some rare monsters will have a modifier on them called lightning resistant, which drastically boosts up their resistance. You can actually even roll map mods, for example this one, which gives monsters 39% monster elemental resistances, and that could actually be even higher than that depending on what you take on your Atlas tree, because some of these modifiers will buff the effects of the tablets as well as the effects of the waystones. So just be aware of that. You could be giving even a white monster that you would anticipate doesn't have a lot of resistance, possibly all the way up to 75. And if you don't have a way to reduce that down to 0, you're doing a ton less damage. So how would you solve that on a typical Stormweaver? Well, first up, let's look at the passive tree. So I actually don't have it spec'd because I'm solving this a different way, but on a budget, the best way to solve penetration would be these 3 nodes because it's 18 plus 6 plus 6, and you actually also get a bonus of 6% LE damage as extra lightning damage. So that would be a way to solve it on the tree. This might be a little overkill. It is a way to get penetration, But you could even honestly just socket lightning penetration onto your gem links. And actually in the written guide, I do suggest lightning pen in lightning warp for budget options here. Very easy to solve, and if you feel like you have low damage and you're not sure how much you are reducing enemy resistances, it doesn't hurt to simply do this slight change to your build and demo a few maps, see how it feels. Because realistically speaking, a lot of builds, mine included, are going to suggest using elemental weakness, although the issue with this is that in practice, I don't think a lot of you guys are actually cursing very much, because you press it down and it takes like a second to actually detonate. So when is this even going to be benefiting you? Maybe on one map boss per map, most likely, because it's very annoying to play. So yeah, this also in conjunction with the penetration will be nice on the map bosses that get 75 resistance, but even just getting through the map, you may want to experiment with penetration and see if that helps out your damage issues. The next topic is also very easy to solve, and it's going to be specific to what you're playing. And it's the topic of efficient buffing skills. In Path of Exile 2, there are so many ways to make your main skill do a lot more damage. And in our League Start guide for the Arc Stormweaver, we had a few different ways, namely dropping Flame Wall, Orb of Storms, and, you know, honestly, Elite Weakness is one as well. Mana Tempest, Shooting Arc. And that is a lot of buttons. Realistically, you want to have a set of buffs that feel comfortable enough that you're going to play every single map with them and you're going to be happy about it. So this is partially why the build I'm playing right now looks a little bit different from the League Starter. We tested out a lot of different things, and I wanted to make something that would be comfortable enough that people would love to press the buttons rather than be a little bit miserable about it. So my current recommendation for efficient combo buffs would be this playstyle where you ball lightning, and then you can lightning warp and you just hold it down. As you can see, if you just shoot a bunch of ball lightnings at the enemy, you can hold down right click and you're gonna detonate 12 plus explosions just by pressing this once. And that's a very easy combo play style because it's just left click, hold left click, then hold right click. And if you're setting up for a boss, obviously you are going to want to do the Sigil of Power tech that I talked about in the previous video guide for Lightning Warp, and you're going to want to do this very nice large curse. And then, you know, you have the one button of Orb of Storms if you want. That also synergizes with Lightning Warp, by the way. It's not too many buttons. It is a ton of damage. Lightning Warp is so much damage. You want to find whatever playstyle suits you. You know, if you like more buttons, maybe you could play the League Starter we suggested. But if you're like me and you want a nice mixture of buttons and just being able to relax, this is a solid middle ground. And obviously, the other extreme would be playing something like Spark with very few buttons. However, I do know a lot of people like the Spark build in 0.1 that we put out that had very few buttons. Realistically speaking, I think we can eventually get there, but right now we're day 4 of the league, and I don't really want to push that kind of build because you are going to be leaving a lot of damage on the table. And if you play something like Lightning Warp, that would be a way to bridge the gap and fix that damage while still having a more comfortable playstyle. This third point is going to be the most complicated decision and also the most interesting thing to talk about, because I don't think a single content creator has ever even mentioned this, yet alone explain this decision. And it's the important decision whether to use the Archmage buff or Zenith II support. Because I believe you have to use either one or the other to be fully efficient on Stormweaver. And the decision isn't that obvious because they're both quite powerful. The Archmage buff itself is relatively straightforward in that it gives us damage as extra lightning damage based on the amount of flat mana stacked on our character. So at 1600 flat mana, without Archmage, I'm sitting at 15,000 damage to Lightning Warp. And when we turn the buff on, we get roughly 50% more damage all the way up to 23,000. That is a huge amount of damage for a simple 100 Spirit Reservation. And there is the downside that you have to be aware of, where the higher you actually scale the mana pool, the higher your cost becomes, because your spell costs get scaled by a percentage of your maximum mana. So with Archmage turned on, my mana cost is sitting at 219. With it turned off, it's 133, which means using Archmage, you may have trouble sustaining your mana. And if your mana drops to 0, obviously your damage is not real, right? Like this DPS needs to be constant. However, if you can maintain it, it's obviously very good. And now we need to touch on Zenith II, because this is where things get a little interesting. Zenith II is a support that gives you 30% more damage as long as you're above 90% of your mana. And that's a good amount of damage. However, it's going to be hard to sustain above 90% of your mana at all times. Although ideally, if you are in a situation where you are always at full mana, that's going to feel super comfortable, right? Like that is what you want to aim for. So thankfully, Zenith actually has an upside that's even more important than the 30% more damage, in my opinion, which is the stat line 25% of supported skills costs are recouped as mana. So what does that mean? That means, let me actually just demo this. That might be easier. My character is sitting at 260 mana recovery, and I'm going to spend a lot of mana on Lightning Warp, and we're going to watch how this changes, because we have Zenith on the Lightning Warp right now. You can see it's climbing, because Recoup is an 8-second buff, and we actually hit 400, and that wasn't even the full 8 seconds. Because now, when you are casting your main spell and it has Zenith equipped, you are getting this massive stacking ramped mana buff. And that will drastically improve your mana regen, helping you actually meet the criteria of staying above 90% of your mana. But you have to make sure that you have a big enough mana pool to actually do this. And the way you can test this out would be you look at the mana cost of your skill. Right now it's 160, and you look at your total mana cost. And you need to multiply the Lightning Warp by 10 to make sure it can stay under 90%. So my mana pool is 1644. I only have 44 extra mana before I lose the 30% more damage buff. And that's actually not enough, as you can see right now, because I'm casting Lightning Warp so fast that it's not going back over. And you can just open your tooltip, spam your spell, and you're going to see it briefly drops down to 12.8 because I'm losing the 30% more mana multiplier. So this should help you decide on whether you can even run Zenith. Obviously, running Zenith is way more comfortable than running Archmage, because Zenith helps promote a full mana pool, which is just super comfortable to play, whereas Archmage really helps promote you having 0 mana, because the more mana you have, the harder it becomes to sustain. However, Archmage is a lot of damage, and you might be fine just not caught casting your spell with full uptime. Just be aware, if your mana bottoms out, Archmage might actually be less damage because you have to wait for the mana to come back. So this is the decision making, and it's why Archmage is not always the most damage, even if it improves your tooltip by a whopping 50% more multiplier. So realistically, in my current setup, I'm likely going to try to scale the mana high enough where even with multiple casts, the regen will have enough time to ramp up so that I'm always above 90%. But the fallback plan obviously is to use Archmage. Just be aware, if you cannot maintain the mana 100% of your time, your tooltip damage is fake because you're sitting around waiting. And then obviously there's that super dream scenario where maybe you can maintain Zenith and Archmage, but realistically, with Zenith, you're trying to scale your mana pool high enough to just meet the 90% criteria. And then with Archmage, the higher you scale it, the worse your mana becomes. So I just don't think that is something you can achieve on most skills. Maybe if you don't focus on scaling plus levels, it'll be achievable. However, scaling plus levels is such a nice form of damage. I really think the main decision is Zenith 2 or Archmage, and this will hopefully help answer that question for you. And I realized in editing, I actually do want to give you guys a solution if you're pretty close to maintaining Zenith, but not quite there. Make sure you look at your support gems and see the mana multiplier. For example, right now considered casting is increasing my mana by 15%. So if I take this off and I put on something that is still pretty good, but it doesn't have mana multiplier, it will make it a little bit easier. So we went from 160 down to 140. I don't actually know if this is going to be enough to maintain it, but we can test it out. No, it's not. We're still dropping. But it's bridging the gap a little bit closer because it's 140 versus there's 139 versus the total mana pool being 1,644. If you're enjoying the video, a like and a follow really go a long way to helping me out with the YouTube algorithm. And a little sneak peek of what to expect from tomorrow's video, we're going to be going over a full crafting process for making a focus for any spellcaster completely from scratch. And I've already updated the loot filter to show the bases we're going to require for this craft. So if you're not yet following my endgame Path of Exile 2 loot filter, there is going to be a link in the video description on how to get that, so you'll be prepared to craft this very powerful item in the near future. My last tip is going to be on cast speed and why I think the majority of players actually misunderstand this stat. Now this ring, the only damage on it is the 29% cast speed, and when I take it off, you're going to notice my tooltip for Lightning Warp doesn't change. And a bunch of people will interpret this as cast speed not being important, which couldn't be further from the truth. Cast speed is the most important scaler on Lightning Warp. And this is a tangent, but your tooltip does not equal your damage. We could take off this, which is probably the best damage link in the game, and it doesn't change your tooltip either. But let me explain the cast speed situation. So Lightning Warp, yes, this is a small picture of the puzzle in terms of its hit, but we are casting it based on the ball lightning. So if I have low cast speed, we have less ball lightnings, and I'm not going to be able to detonate the explosion on them as much, and it's going to be far less damage. So the best way to scale damage is actually just to ramp up the amount of ball lightnings we can shoot out. And yes, I guess Lightning Warp is a little bit of a unique skill, whereas most other skills, the cast speed will be baked in to the damage on the skill. But I just wanted to mention this. Realistically, cast speed, one of the best scalers for damage, and not only that, it's one of the best scalers for quality of life, because cast speed also lets you get out your utility spells faster. You're going to drop your Orb of Storms much more quickly. You're going to drop your buffs more quickly, and you'll be able to start moving much more quickly after you throw out the spell. So yeah, if you're playing Lightning Warp or if you're playing a different spell, make sure you do prioritize cast speed, as you do need that on spellcasters, period. All right, we're kind of stretching the limits of time for this video. I want to boot up my stream and start playing the game. So my final tip is going to be an expensive chase goal for you guys, which is Rakiata's Flow. I bought this on, I believe, the second day of the league for 3 divines, and it's been bouncing up and down in price, to say the least. A couple days ago, it was 4 divines. Then someone in chat said it was 12 divines, went up to 20, dropped down to 15. I have no idea what the price of this is going to be when you watch the video, but let me just explain how this works. Hits with supported skills treat enemy, monster, elemental resistance values as inverted. This is essentially a replacement for lightning penetration support. What lightning penetration does is, no matter what the enemy's resistance is, it will lower it by 30% unless that would take them negative. And if it takes the enemy resistance negative, it will lower it by whatever the amount to bring them down to 0. And you're going to pair lightning support with stuff I said at the beginning of the video, like the electric amplification, possibly breath of lightning, as well as elemental weakness, to try and get everything down to 0 if possible. However, this is actually crazy, because when you invert a monster that has positive 75 resistance, suddenly the resistance doesn't become 0, it becomes negative 75. And that's a massive boost to our damage. This is just unbelievable. I'm kind of surprised this got in the game, because in Path of Exile 1, the stat exists, but the mod says you have a 15% chance for supported skills to invert enemy resistance. So it's not always doing it. This just guarantees it gets inverted every single time. So if you have this support, it means the 40% monster elemental resistance mod on a waystone, as well as lightning resistance modifier on a rare monster actually boosts your damage. It doesn't reduce them. And it also means this will lower your damage if you cast it. So if you do have Rakiata's Flow, you really should just take off all penetration. Actually, no, hold on. You don't need to take off all penetration, but you want to take off all of the minus resistances, because minus resistance means when you flip it, the inversion becomes worse. However, with penetration, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I do believe you can keep that on, because I'm not sure if that will lower the resistance. It will just penetrate it. And if you do have multiple different damage skills, possibly having penetration on the tree would be okay. And if penetration on the tree doesn't work that way, you could at the very least probably get penetration support on, say, maybe Arc or Orb of Storms. But realistically speaking, I am doing most of my damage with Rakiata's Flow on the Lightning Warp, and I do not scale penetration, period. Everything else is mostly utility, and that's my current setup. So I do believe this may be expensive, but I do want to give that to you guys as an option for chase goal. And yeah, hopefully this video helped answer a few questions about how to scale damage with casters. I do know it's not the most simple thing to do. There are probably other ways, and feel free to use the comments to share other ways you've been scaling your damage. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you live on twitch.tv/animeprincess. Peace.